Hello, this is Dr. Heather Lee, and this is part 2 of Thinking and Questioning. In part 1, we talked about the different levels of thinking according to Dr. Bloom and his colleagues. And today in this video, we're going to talk about some research-based recommendations for questioning, and especially wait time. We'll talk about that and make sure we understand it. And then some questioning techniques, things to do and not do in the classroom. So let's begin with some of these recommendations that have been found through research, what is most effective in questioning. And here's an interesting one. It says, focus on what is important as opposed to what is unusual. Now, here's what this means. Sometimes we think, okay, I'm going to ask my students a question about just something that I think is really going to pique their interest, something odd, something unusual from the topic. But the problem with that is that when we try to focus students on like a weird, unusual thing that isn't very important, their brains don't attach very well to that. Instead, what is important actually is interesting to the brain. It's interesting to the mind. So when we question students, think about the content of that question and make sure you're focusing on the important stuff, because you are going to be asking their brains to engage and think about important things and learn important things. And you don't want to waste that brain energy on something that's just strange or unusual just to get their attention. So focus on the important concepts that you want to teach. Another one, this is very obvious, I say it over and over again, but higher level questions that the analysis, synthesis, evaluation, they produce deeper thinking, better thinking than lower level questions. So we need to ask many of those higher level ones in order to get the kind of thinking that we desire. Another one is waiting, and we're going to talk specifically about wait time. But the research has found that waiting briefly before accepting responses from students has the effect of increasing the depth of students' answers. So a teacher asks a question and then waits and then allows students to respond. That results in better thinking for our students and their answers. And another thing to consider is that questions are effective learning tools even before the learning begins. So beginning your class with an excellent question to get them thinking, or before you begin reading a section of the textbook together. Those are very good for the brain to start engage in what you're talking about. Many times we think that questions are for the end of class, but the beginning, middle, and all throughout and at the end are excellent time, even at the beginning. Now let's go back to that wait time and talk about that. It's a very important concept and something that needs to be practiced in the classroom. Now there are two types of wait time. The first one is the one I'm focusing on. Wait time, number one, that's the length of the time a teacher waits after asking a question before they continue. So can anybody tell me why General so-and-so was seeking help during this battle? Okay, so that's a question. Then you wait, and even if students are raising their hands, even if they want to answer, you wait before you answer. That's the first kind of wait time. But there's another kind of wait time that's the length of time a teacher waits after receiving an answer before continuing. So a student answers, and instead of jumping right back into what you were going to say, you give a couple of seconds for everybody to process that answer, to think about it, okay? But it's especially wait time number one that I'm talking about. The average length of wait time is less than a second. So why did that general ask for help? Jason, what's the answer? We don't even wait a second in our normal way of teaching and thinking. We are in a hurry, we want to use time well, we just go, go, go. But the recommended wait time is 3 to 7 seconds long. Now, that's a long time. In fact, I'm going to pause right now for 3 whole seconds. I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to pause for 3 seconds. Ready? Why do you think that general asked for help? Sarah, what do you think? That was 3 seconds, okay? That's the least amount of time we should wait. Now here's 7 seconds. Why do you think that general was asking for help? Jeremy, what do you think? Did you hear how long that, it felt so long in the classroom. But here's the thing. When you wait and just count in your head 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. You don't even consider answering a question before that or allowing them to answer. You can expect the quality and quantity of student participation to increase. More students will be thinking about it. You'll see more hands raised. You'll see more students who are ready to answer. And then what they say is going to be better quality. So this is very well spent time. Okay, so that wait time is very important. Also, some other things about questioning techniques. First of all, you want to plan questions in advance whenever you can. You want to make sure they're very clear and specific questions. You'd be surprised how often our questions are very vague. We think they make sense, or we just make them up on the spot, and then students are like, what exactly are you asking? So they should be very clear. We should vary the levels and kinds of questions. So in other words, the levels of thinking, there should be application, some synthesis, some comprehension. There should be a good variety. And also remember convergent questions with one right answer and divergent questions with many, many possible answers. Also, our questions should have an order to them. They should be leading somewhere, logical and sequential. And that doesn't happen if we just make them up as we go along. And then, whenever possible, if we can relate those questions to our students' lives and their situations. This especially focuses on that application level. But we think, how can I relate this area to my students? And so I ask them, have you ever been in a situation where blah, blah, blah? Make them think of, and then you lead them towards the subject you're talking about. And so they have a real personal situation that they're thinking of, and it helps them to connect better with the material. A few other techniques. Here's some things to remember about when you call on students, okay? So you ask a question and then think about what happens in the classroom. First of all, you should call on students randomly. That means they might be raising their hands, they might not be raising their hands. Most of the time, teachers just call on students who have raised their hands. The problem is, everybody understands that, okay, if I don't raise my hands, I can kind of check out. Or there's a smarty pants in the room and they know, okay, Joshua's always going to have an answer. And a certain student dominates the classroom, and that student is probably one of your strongest, most knowledgeable students. So you should call on students randomly in a varied and unpredictable way. Make sure you don't just call on students in the front and the back on certain sides. Make sure you don't favor boys over girls, but randomly. And then you should call on students after you ask your question. You shouldn't say their name first, like, Mary, can you tell us why blah, blah, blah? And the reason is that everybody knows that question is for Mary. It's not for them. But instead, even if you know you're calling on Mary, you ask it of everybody because you want everybody's brain engaged. You wait for 3 seconds at least, and then you call on Mary. Also, when you call on students, give that wait time. And by the way, let me say something important about that wait time. Wait time is particularly important for higher level thinking. If you are asking a question about a date or a name, something that students should recall much more quickly, you don't have to wait as long, okay? But 1, 2 seconds, sometimes 3. But it's especially the ones where we want quality thinking, where there's divergent answers. There's many ways they could go. Those questions, it's essential that you give those 3 to 7 seconds. And another thing, don't answer your own question. Some teachers have a habit of doing that. You ask a question, maybe 1 or 2 people respond, but not enough, and you end up answering it yourself. If you find that students don't know the answer, then leave them. Ask simpler questions, remind them of something, and then let your question stand. So don't answer your own question. When students answer, don't repeat their answers. Sometimes people do this continually. They just repeat, and they say what the student says. And what that does is it basically teaches students that they can tune out other students. Just listen to the teacher, she'll say it again. But you want them actively listening to what those students say. You can also have others respond. So you don't just take one answer, you have other answers, and you can say, who can add to that? Who agrees with that? Who maybe wants to clarify something? Can someone take what Mary has said and expand on it, say it in a different way? So you're encouraging more of a discussion, and you're encouraging them to value each other, what they're saying, and to follow up. And the other thing is, we should have a perspective of encouraging, desiring students to ask questions. Sometimes when we are in a hurry, when we have a lot that we feel like we need to teach, we actually discourage student questions with our body language, with our face, and simply by saying, I don't have time for questions. But those questions can be essential to the learning. More learning might happen through those question times than during our teaching. So do encourage questions. And yes, there are times when you have to move on, when you can't have the discussion keep going. But don't be a teacher who students know, oh, don't ask questions in that class. Just keep going. All right. I'm going to skip over these 2 slides and bring you back to the end. And I want you to think again about that original question. What is the relationship between thinking, questioning, and learning? Is it a little bit more clear in your minds how the questions we ask solicit certain types of thinking? That if we are asking questions that involve higher level thinking, and we give our students time, that wait time, 3 to 7 seconds, and we encourage them to think and talk and discuss, that learning will be improved. These 3 things are very linked together. And as a teacher, if you focus on good questions and good questioning techniques, the thinking and learning of your students should benefit. Thank you so much for your attention. Have a great day.